And what we're going to do is we're going to learn literally what has changed, how to watch for it, and how to prevent this from happening again. So those of you who may have been bitten by either one of these updates, you'll have a good understanding of why it happened and how to actually get out of it. And for those of you who are just trying to get a better understanding of search and directionally speaking, how Google is changing the way it looks at things, Panda and Penguin are really, really good placeholders for understanding the direction of search and the direction that Google's taking going forward. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on those. So it's really interesting to look at these because both updates essentially are targeting spam or targeting SEO. So we're going through an entire course about how to do SEO and how to do link building. And the first two things we're talking about are two approaches that Google has taken to actually go after SEOs or go after link builders. Now, these are really, really important updates because they help us understand what Google is starting to look for when they're thinking about how do people optimize sites and how are people getting around our algorithms. Now, the first one we'll talk about is Panda, which started in around February of 2011, and that was going after these lower quality or thin sites. They called them thin affiliate sites at the time. And then the second one is Penguin, which happened around April of 2012, the first one. And some people consider this to be the over-optimization or over-targeting or over-SEO type of algorithm update. Both of these updates have evolved over the past few years, and they've gotten more aggressive. So there's Panda, I believe, 25 or higher than that at this point in terms of the numbers of iterations of Panda releases that Google's even told us about. And we know that there's been a Penguin 1, and most recently there's been a Penguin 2.0 update, which I'll talk about. And both of these updates have really changed the approach or changed the game, so to speak, for SEO. So for people who are trying to game the system very, very aggressively, they suffered from these. So for some of us who actually had a good idea of what was happening and how things were changing, we were relatively well protected from this. So the first one that I want to talk about is Google Panda. Now again, this rolled out in 2011, and this was known when it came out for killing content farms. And it wasn't just content farms, it was killing the footprint for what was looking like a content farm. And a lot of big websites got hit by this. I believe at the time, Pennies got hit by this, and there was a continued rolling update of Panda that took out tons of great websites out there. So Panda in and of itself actually just uses a model, right? It's an algorithm that goes out and says, look for this type of website. And unfortunately, a lot of really popular websites fell into that model and thus were hurt by Panda. So it's not necessarily the type of update that's going to go after bad websites. It's just going after bad footprints. Now, the most common issue with Panda, and the one that most people tend to run into, is duplication of content both internally and externally. And this is super important. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're even doing it. So if you're taking in an affiliate feed from Amazon or an affiliate feed from some other site, and you're just taking that feed and you're dumping it into Drupal or WordPress or some other system, but you're not necessarily rewriting that content at all. So you have the same headlines, the same descriptions, the same titles as every other website out there, then basically what Google's going to do is it's going to look across the board and it's going to look at all of these and it's going to say, okay, there's really huge duplication of this particular piece of content. Tell me who's the best at it. Drop all the rest of them. And it wasn't necessarily just like that page falls out of the index, but where it seemed very rampant, Google was dropping entire sites. So this is a dramatic fall in traffic. If you're actually monitoring PR with the PR toolbars, it's going from PR0 to PRNA. So this isn't something that's a small difference. The other place that we saw this a lot was with lazy spinning. So a lot of article sites got hit by this particular update, and what we see in a lot of article updates or in a lot of article content is spun content. And the spinning of content, the practice has really been butchered to some extent. So you could spin very lightly or you could spin very heavily. Now a light spun article, according to Google, is really going to look like a duplicate article. So if you're just changing synonyms and not really changing the tone at all, then it's going to look like the same exact content. So you're going to know it's Panda when your entire site drops, big drops in traffic, and you're not registering any PR at all. Now, like I said, a lot of big sites got hurt by Panda. And the trend here is really the uniqueness or the lack of uniqueness from a website. Now, I want to stress one thing. The important thing to understand about these kind of updates is it has nothing to do with authorship, right? Authorship is I wrote really great content, I put it out there, and I'm the author, right? But if some other website, let's just say, I don't know, Hub Pages picks up my article and republishes it out there, and they rank for my article and they outrank me, when Panda comes by, they may consider me to be the duplicate and wipe me out, even though I was the author. So Google doesn't necessarily dictate authorship really well, they just dictate the power of the site ranking for the content of interest. Now, the other thing is that there's a lot of sites that previously used link building, that were previously used as link building sources, now pulled out of the index. So what you're going to see in a lot of these is sites killed by Panda fall into the category of those generally used as article marketing indexes or article marketing directories. eZine articles probably being the biggest one on this particular list. We use these constantly, right? We would take content, spin it, dump it into eZine articles, respin it, dump it back into eZine articles. So these were just hubs, right? Offering very little value to the end user, but to an SEO, it was basically like a pool of links. And for a very long time, in the early 2000s, this was how everybody built links, right? This was the way to do it, and it was super, super easy. The benefit of the traffic farms and the technique of using farms as link sources overall basically just kind of fell out, right? So if you were dependent on using these link farms, or if you were getting all your link juice from eZine articles or Hub Pages, just as two examples, when this happened, your site was also killed by Panda because you basically lost all your link weight. And what you can see here is the loss of visibility, visibility being the number of keyword positions lost, and ranking positions, estimated click-through rates from Systrix. This is just estimates, right? But what it tells you is that content farms basically just got killed by Panda. And this is the first iteration of Panda. I talked a little bit about how to tell if this is Panda, and this is just one of the websites that experienced a major hit from Panda 1.0. And the quickest way to tell if you're getting hit with any algorithm update is using Moz.com's algorithm change or Serps.com's volatility indexes, going through and looking at these two websites and saying, I just had a big drop in traffic. Has anything going on with Google right now? And that's the first thing that you do, right? If nothing's going on with Google, you caused some kind of an issue, or there's some issue that's specific to your website. So you've been penalized for some reason, you're cross-linking wrong, or you've set up some 301s that aren't working properly, or maybe you didn't set 301s for pages you should have. There's a ton of different reasons why you could drop traffic, and it has nothing at all to do with Google, but there's only a few reasons why you'd be dropping traffic, and it ties back to an algorithm change. And in most cases, it's because you're infringing on some aspect of the terms of services of Google. The other thing that you should be doing on a fairly regular basis is using things like Copyscape, or you can even use Google Alerts, which we'll talk about later, to be checking for duplication of your content. Check for your pen name. Check for specific phrases which always show up on your website to see if you're being scraped. A lot of good webmasters will actively go out and pursue this to see if they are in a position where they're going to get outcompeted, or you have people aggressively stealing your content. Now, in most places, people stealing your content really doesn't matter, right? They steal it, they move on. They're not necessarily good webmasters. They're scraping content in the first place. But you are going to hit a couple situations where somebody will scrape your content and actually be in a position to outrank you. And those are the ones you really need to be concerned about. So if you're really, really investing in your content, make sure that you're patrolling to make sure that it's safe. Now, how do you fix Panda? Let's say you're in that situation of that previous graph, like Suite 101. How do you actually go about recovering from this? And despite what many people say, there is a recovery for all of these, right? If you've been hit by Panda, if you've been hit by Penguin, there's ways out of it. And the quickest way is to actually stop doing that type of content, right? Remove bad content from your website in particular. So if you've duplicated content, you have internal duplicate content, get rid of that as quickly as possible. If you have external duplicate content, honestly, you probably aren't going to necessarily go after that, but what you're going to want to do is actually go over it with better content. So you're going to want to actually over-execute on your linking strategy and use some of the tactics that we're going to talk about later in this series. Now, when you do rewrite with intent. And when I talk about that, what I really mean is that spinning only partially fixes things. So if you're going to spin content, that's fine. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to be a lot more aggressive. So you have to spin content with a different message. So you can't say the cat ran up the hill and then the feline ran up the log steep, right? It has to be a totally different message. It has to say something like, the cat trotted down the forest looking for a mouse, right? It can't necessarily have the same exact tone. Google understands synonyms, right? And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand how well they really get things like latent semantic indexing, right? They understand language more than we know. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can rank across language, but they can understand the difference between a cat and a feline and knows that there's a relationship there, and they also understand the difference between a hill and a slope, right? So swapping a synonym doesn't necessarily change the tone. When you spin, change the tone. Really make big rearrangements of your content. Also remember that if you're using Copyscape to monitor, Copyscape is only going to catch part of the issue. So if you have people that do spin, they're not necessarily going to catch it. It's important that you're actually patrolling for things that are going to be specifically unique to your own website when you're actually looking for people who are scraping your content. So that was Panda, right? And Panda's been huge, and Panda's been one of the biggest ones that we've talked about because it's gotten so much press. Now, the other one that's actually been really, really aggressive is Google Penguin. And Google Penguin is kind of like the over-optimization or the update that's known for killing SEO, right? The one thing that you always hear people say is SEO is dead, right? The truth is that bad SEO is dead. And I think it's such a cliche thing to say is that SEO is dead, but the reality is that people who don't necessarily understand the algorithms, what Google's looking for, and ultimately what Google wants are going to get bitten by these types of changes. And the most common issue here is that there's improper anchor text usage of inbound links. Now, this is something that was talked about at least 5 years ago, if not longer, where you had people that were going out and doing SEO and they'd get 1,000 backlinks. And from those 1,000 backlinks, they'd use the exact same anchor text for every single backlink. That is artificial. That is not natural. That is not common. And when we were going in and getting this really good data on our backlink analysis, when you look at your websites, your backlinks never looked like that. So if I look at a backlink profile and I see 80-90% of it's all a single keyword for a page, there's a red flag there. And that's a really, really easy thing for Google to notice. So if you consider how complex the algorithm is today and how complex SEO is today, right? Think about all of the data that Google needs to pull in. It's ridiculous for you to actually assume that Google won't be able to notice that 80% of an anchor text or 90% of an anchor text or even 60% of an anchor text is an exact match for the keyword that lines up with your URL, your title, and your on-page factors, right? This is the easiest thing for Google to spot, and Google Penguin was the easiest thing for them to actually go after. Now, how do you know you've been hit by Penguin, right? It's a lot different than Panda. When you're looking at Penguin, you're going to see page-specific drops. You could be ranking lower, but not necessarily gone. So it could look like a penalty. And by and large, home pages tend to be the most affected, most likely because the majority of link building goes to a home page. Again, I want to stress the important thing here is that when you start to see changes, go back, go to Moz.com, go to SERPs.com, and look at how the algorithm's changing. Use the links in the past slide. Tie your changes to an algo update, and then you can have a better understand. As sites like Webmaster World start to dive in and understand what's the basis for that algorithm change, you can actually start to modulate your efforts to correct it, right? And again, everything is correctable. Now, fixing Penguin is actually rather easy as well. So the way that we fix Panda is that we build over it, right? We had duplication of content, we get rid of the internal duplication, and then the external duplication is eliminated by syndicating more unique content or creating new unique content to actually go out and get links. The other ways that we can optimize over Panda we're going to talk about later. But Penguin is actually rather similar, right? If you bought links, which is one of the big things that they went after with Panda, and Penguin, is just stop buying links, right? Stop buying links from the same sources. So if you're actually going out and buying links from link brokers, stop it, right? Change your anchor text, remove that link, whatever you need to do. Stop doing that because those are things that are actively being patrolled. If you're going to buy links, we'll talk about better ways to do it later. drive in new links to poorly ranking web pages. So if you were hit on a single page level, then go back and actually start to go after links for that same page that dropped. You can outlink a penalty, right? You can outlink Penguin. You can outlink Panda. So if you've dropped, you can bring yourself back in by linking, right? The other thing is to update the anchor text of any properties that you control. So if you created this portfolio of 80% anchor text that's exact matches to your keyword, go through, and if you can access these properties, so if they're on eZine articles, if they're on Facebook, if they're on Scoop It, if they're on Hub Pages, if they're on whatever that you can access, your WordPress blogs, go through, find those anchor texts, change them to make them sound more natural. And I'll talk more about what natural actually looks like to Google later on. Now, the important thing here is don't bother submitting a reconsideration request. This is something that Google has highly publicized after all the negative press that they got around Penguin and Panda, but the reality is that most times those aren't really going to get noticed, and most times a reconsideration request isn't going to change how you're ranking in Google. So it's important to take a step back, realize what you're actually going to be doing. You're going to be basically admitting fault to Google. Yeah, I did something wrong. Here's what I did wrong. If anything, you're probably setting flags for them to catch you in the future. And the reality is, of all the reconsideration requests that I have seen submitted over the years, very few, if none of them, have actually garnered any kind of changes to the rank of a web page. Now, the basics around this really surround how to properly use anchor text. And when you're looking at Panda in particular, where most people really ran into issues is specifically with how they applied their anchor text. Now, if I wanted to rank for a word like buy cheap tickets, the way that most people were getting hit by Panda and Penguin were going after terms like buy cheap tickets and nothing else, right? So it's not saying that buy cheap tickets is a bad anchor text, right? It's bad if that's all you're using. But in the context, if you're using buy cheap tickets, you can use shop for cheap tickets, buy a cheap ticket, find cheaper tickets online, and then start to think about synonyms. Online affordable tickets, shop discount tickets online. Those are all really, really great anchor texts, which from a semantic standpoint, all say the same thing. And that's the important aspect of having a natural looking anchor text, is that I may call them affordable, you may call them cheap, somebody else may call them discounts, but that's all saying buy cheap tickets, right? That's all saying the same exact thing, so Google's going to make that understanding and actually consider that towards the term buy cheap tickets. And it's also not necessarily going to set any kind of red flags for you to be over-optimizing. Now, the other aspect of this, and this is where most people get kind of uncomfortable with the aspect, is thinking about using anchor text that has absolutely nothing to do with your keyword. So throw out LSI keywords, right? Throw out everything about optimization, throw out all these exact match keywords, and start to think about what would a real person use, right? A lot of times people link to websites with URLs, right? www.url.com, right? Or just url.com or http://url.com. These are very common ways to link to websites that we all use on a regular basis. And then look at the other ones that you see on a regular basis. Click here. That's a really good, solid anchor text. That's one that you see used all the time. And you also see view this website, visit this website, learn more, see on this page, see here. These are common phrases that people use when jumping from website to another website. And when you start to look at this breakdown, you need to make sure that your actual keyword anchor text includes a mix of, exact match keywords, synonyms used as keywords, different phrases which sound like your initial keyword, URLs, and then these random assortments of these other terms which are related. This is a best practice for using anchor text, and this is the only way that you're actually going to appear natural to Google. So this is the basis, right? Understanding these two particular algorithm changes help you understand the overall goal of what Google's going after, right? They don't want you to look SEO'd, right? They don't want you to SEO, period. So your focus is how do I actually build credibility in Google without actually looking like an SEO? And the way you do that is do smart, really intelligent link building using proper random assorted anchor text, right?